Welcome to Denim and episode 4 of the Denim Jacket series. Close your eyes and picture a denim jacket. Are there two V lines going down the front? Then it's a type 3. That's why this is the most iconic denim jacket of all time. This has been the most popular jacket for over 60 years. Now let's find out why. With the introduction of the Type 3, Levi's jackets were brought down from the saddle and moved out onto the highway. This was the first jacket ever made using pre-shrunk XX denim fabric, and it quickly became an essential part of the cowboys, teenagers, and truck drivers' wardrobe. Worn by ranchers, rock stars, truck drivers, and rebels, the Type 3 is second only to the 501 jeans in the Levi's portfolio of iconic garments. The Type 3 denim jacket, given the lot number 70505 in 1967, is often referred to as the trucker jacket. The Levi's Vintage Clothing Type 3 jacket is true to the model from 1967. It is made from 14-ounce pre-shrunk denim and has a slim, tapered fit with 2 chest pockets, copper shank buttons, side waist adjusters, and a big E red tab. So what is a trucker? Which of these jackets are considered the trucker, or are they all? It's kind of a term applied after the fact. Like the Byzantine Empire, they didn't call themselves the Byzantines, they called themselves the Romans, but when we apply history to it, we add that label. Same thing, the trucker is a term coined by Japanese collectors referring to these short jackets that had the pockets up higher. You didn't have hand pockets, it's not a coat, it's a jacket. If you're sitting down like a truck driver would be, you have your top pockets and not your belly ones, like in a coat. Levi's themselves started calling them truckers in the 90s as this term started to apply. And then you can see that they're selling truckers that look like type 1, 2, 3s. But it's just become this more universal term. I think we can divide it between like the blouses, the triple pleat blouse, first few 506s, and then it starts to become a trucker. Some people think of as just this 7507. Some people think all type 3s are the trucker. But I ask you, what is a type 1 what? A type 1 jacket? It wasn't called a jacket then. What is a type 1? Type 1 what? Type 2 what? Type 3 what? Denim jackets? Well, yeah, but the blouse is a blouse. The jackets are type 1, 2, 3. And the trucker applies to type 3? Or just the 70505? We can do a chicken and the egg thing with this. But no, historically, none of these jackets are considered truckers at the time yet. However, the Type 3 has a really long history, and we're still living in it. So we are still in a Type 3 age. There's something that needs to be understood about American history. The 1960s did not want to be the 1950s. Now, it took most of the country until the mid-decade to realize this, but Levi's was ahead of the trends, as usual. The front of the Type 3 is radically different from the Type 1 and 2. It was meant to look new for a new age. The biggest changes are, number 1, no more pleats. They're too old-fashioned, and they don't complement the pre-shrunk style. Remember, those pleats are meant to be cut so that you can have a slightly larger jacket and then re-sewn. Maybe you fit a sweater under there or something. But number 2, the V-line stitches running vertically down from the pockets to the waist. This is what makes it the most iconic jacket. This design right here. And these two designs were the brainchild of Jack Lucier. He was a designer for Levi's from 1952 until 1962. Then he began his own interior design company. While working at Levi's, he met his wife who worked there too. Plus, it's noteworthy that his dad, Chris Lucier, was the designer of the original red tab. There's no more T-backs. And you will see this more distinct side panel stitching in the back. Some of the other detail changes are smaller pockets. You can't fit a full pack of smokes in there, but it does hold a few dime bags. Dark copper buttons. Given that there are no rivets, especially in the 67 model, you need some copper coloring, and this does the trick. Pre-shrunk 14-ounce denim. Now, it won't shrink, but if you buy rigid, you can still distress it in your own patterns and style. The Type 3s always had bar tacks on the sleeves, never rivets. The patches are going to become more narrow over time, and we are going to see a lot of patch changes, but more on that in historical transitions. Who wore a Type 3? The short answer is everyone. While the triple pleated blouse is worn by miners, the Type 1 by cowboys, the Type 2 by bad boy greasers, the Type 3 became more universal. Hippies, punks, celebrities of all kinds. We will see a lot of variety. George Harrison stands as the biggest symbol because in 1967, aka the Summer of Love, George Harrison was in San Francisco visiting a relative, and a crowd of fans gathered to follow him. He was wearing a Type 3 trucker, and the sensation for this item grew. The Type 3 makes a lot of great appearances in films. 1971, Warren Beatty in The Parallax View. Reminding us that kicking ass in a denim jacket never goes out of style. 1974, Ken Takakura in The Yakuza. This film also stars Robert Mitchum, whom we saw wearing a Type 1 25 years earlier, coming around full circle, giving recognition to the Japanese denim fascination a decade before mainstream culture realized it. Are you police now? 1979, The Warriors. One of the Lizzies is for sure wearing a Type 3, but I wish I could have gotten a better image of it. So for punks in the 1970s who would decorate these with buttons and pins and cut the sleeves off, these were known as battle jackets. It was your armor that you wore on a Saturday night going into the clubs. Mad Men used a Type 3 for, I think this was 1969. And usually their wardrobe department is spot on accurate. But hand pockets weren't available in the 1960s. Of course, Drive brings the Type 3 to a whole new generation. And the Type 3, it's this really good jacket to put in a movie when you want to have a setting that's vaguely 1970s to 1990s or even present day. Taking a look at music, we have Metallica, we have early Nirvana, there's some custom Type 3s, one for the Queen of England, Sir Elton John, and I don't even need to tell you whose this is, but of course Madonna has her own. I mean, did you need a second guess on whose boobs those were? Aside from entertainment, we start to see a lot of decorated Type 3s. Whereas the Type 2 had biker's patches sewn on, the Type 3 was this blank canvas for painters and embroiderers to show off some impressive design. It was for fun, expression, and style. Eventually, it would be for promotion. Now, the big star of the show at the museums is this 1986 Yves Saint Laurent rhinestone cupboard. You can see tons on Etsy of these bedazzled that are all inspired from this. And in the scholarly pursuits, we have Levi's historian, Tracy Panic, rocking her Type 3. Now, she is my number one dream guest interview to have on the show. I'm a little shy and embarrassed to reach out at the moment, but we do, for this video only, have an exclusive Den and Denim interview with John Bender from The Breakfast Club. So John, what do you think of the Denim channel?
That I have such a deep admiration.
Thank you. When do you think is the best time to wear a Type 3 jacket?
You load up, you party.
Besides the jackets, what's your other favorite Levi's items?
Shorts.
Do you have any problem with suspenders or overalls?
What are we supposed to do if we have to take a piss?
How do you feel about Levi's closing their last American factory and making things in Turkey and China?
Demented and sad.
Why should Levi's be made in America?
It's a free country.
Hey, you've been great. Now YouTube won't let me play copyrighted music. You think you can help me out here?
No, 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 no.
The Type 3 was completely redesigned, separate from the Type 2, as talked about before. We're going to see some changes throughout the history of the Type 3. One of the beginning ones is that we're going to see yellow stitching on a very early Type 3 model. This is a remnant from the 50s, that yellow lemon stitching. But then they're going to start adding in some orange stitching, and eventually the Type 3 will be covered in orange stitching, although some factories made black stitching throughout it. Let's look at the patches. We have the numbers. We start with 557XX. The earliest jackets will have the every garment guaranteed, but that's going to go away sometime between 1962 and 1965. And then we're going to see the XX be removed in 1966. Now at this time, there's also two other jackets running concurrently. There's a kids model, but there's also a 558XX, which is the long version. The pockets are still up at the top, but it just fits a taller person or goes down past your waist. And of course, there's a blanket line. That's the 559XX. Blanket lining was 60% wool, 40% cotton for the original Type 1s. The Type 2s were 60% wool, 28% cotton, and 12% synthetic rayon. And this proportion continues for the early Type 3 blanket line. Eventually, they'll make a flannel line Type 3, which isn't as warm as the blanket line. But the most popular warm lining method by far is the Sherpa, released in 1967. Also in 1967, the 557 becomes the 70505-0217, or -0317 for the blanket line. And then in 1984, hand pockets are introduced. That jacket's number is the 70506-217. And as recently as 2019, Levi's made a Type 3 with a slot in the wrist to put a Bluetooth sensor chip. The Type 3 is still alive, going into its 60th year. In the 1990s, LVC recreated the 1962 LVC 557 XX Type 3. It was generally thought that the Type 3 was first released in 1962, until research found a catalog dated February 1961 that lists the 557XX. Let's start with the 1961 557X, the most popular version of them and the best. This is a pre-shrunk jacket, so don't bother getting in the tub with it. Try to get your size, but you still have a little chance of wearing in some fading with this. You do with the others, of course, too, but this is still a XX strong, every garment guaranteed. If you're looking for distress in this version, there's tons of them. Frank, we've already talked about on the show. Wonderful distressing in that honeycomb pattern on the elbows. Then there's Bob Dylan's jacket in Folk City. Not his jacket, it's just from that era that they're attributing it to. Probably the coolest of all of these, I think, is called The Colony. It's the one covered with these bat stickers, and it comes with a matching pair of 1984 501s. Within the LVC world, the 61 and 62 557s are pretty identical, but if you get a 62 year, then you know you're getting something that's like 15 years older. Jumping into 1967, we have the 70505. 70505 style, a little more tapered. We have rigids in these, and I have found 3 different versions of rigid. The 0124, 0131, and 0217. And man, I try to find the differences between these. Here's a 70505, printed one with bats, a bat, and an embroidered tiger. And notice, again, these are going to have different last 4 digits. There's also unbleached cotton denim in various colors. And to finish up the miraculous summer of love year, 1967, is a Sherpa. The 1967 Sherpa features snap buttons. Click, click. Then 1970, Orange Tab jumps in, with and without green corduroy shoulders. And that's the last of the big E's. A funny thing was finding this jacket that is a 67. The paper tag attached to it for original selling information says that it is a big E, 1967 70505. But if you can clearly see, it has a small e. Now, this is just a cool mix-up showing some of the rare inconsistencies in reproductions. One small benefit to recreating such a recent decade like the 80s is that we get hand pockets. And these only come with the 1984 flannel lined coming for you, 70417-9554. From the same catalog as the Bats Colony 557. It has hand pockets, small e, and the more narrow neck patch, along with flannel lining, which is thinner than the blanket lining. I do believe there's a 557 blanket line somewhere, recreation, although I've seen a lot of real vintage ones that you can buy. You also see Type 3 inspired white, black, gray, ones with leather, plenty of corduroy versions. The soapbox is a fun mix match of corduroy pastels. Fit of a Type 3 is going to be very true to size. In fact, of all of the items you'll see in the Levi's Vintage Clothing catalog, this is going to be the most true to size of them all. Get your true size, do not downsize unless you don't care about buttoning it. You can roll up the sleeves, but it rolls a little more rigid than the Type 1 and 2s. The 70505 has more of a tapered silhouette to the waist than the 557 does. That still follows more of that boxy Type 1 and Type 2 style. The Type 3 was never meant to go with a pair of 501s. It was meant to be part of the new lines Levi's was pushing through the 1960s. This is first the 551ZXX in 1961, and then in 1967, when they came out with the 70505, it was meant to go with a pair of 505 jeans. If you're dead set on matching your Type 3 with a pair of 501s, then just think of anything 1960 and onward. For a complete list, check out my video, Every 501, and its second part video, The Rarest Years, for a couple of those missing years there. You can match the 1967 557, the Colony, that has the bats and the moon, with the 1984 501s that have the spider. Coming for you, flannel line with a pair of 84 grays. You can match the Orange Tab 1970, would go great with 69 557s or 66 606s. And that's the Type 3. I've still got 2 more episodes in this denim jacket series. I'm Den from Den and Denim. Thanks for watching.